I want to thank you, first of all, the conference organization, Susan and Jose, for these very, very interesting 2 days. And sorry in advance for my English pronunciation. The subject of this paper deals with a particular iconography that spread in the Greek world since the second half of the 6th century BC, as we have seen yesterday, thanks to very interesting papers of a colleague of mine. The motif represents the pursuit scenes and of female figures by male characters, and this iconography has been the subject of much analysis and debate over the past few decades. The main characters of these scenes usually are gods and heroes. Despite there are some basic features common of these pursuits, their classification and interpretation can change widely. Some scholars view the scenes as paradigms for gender relations in 5th century Athens, while others focus upon their funerary or religious function. Recently, Andrew Stewart described this scene as empowering men in the subjugation of women. For example, the scene with Peleus' capture of Thetis, which is seen as male power play and metaphor of the passage of the woman from wild to civilized creature through marriage. However, more recently there have been challenges to this line of interpretation. C.S. Lewis states that the pursuit of women by gods has a straightforward funerary meaning, and that pursuit themes in general are imagery of the rite of passage, whether it be funerary, nuptial, or initiatory. The work of Christian Serino in Wood, drawing upon semiotics, has been an important contribution to how we interpret and differentiate meaning in such scenes. Blending an iconographic study with a structuralist semiotic approach offers a way of defining and explaining the different meanings that an image carries, as does an awareness of historical change in the imagery. It helps articulating how they coexist and possibly even establishing an order of interpretation. As Serino Wood pointed out in her studies, the iconography of pursuit, while the action of pursuit may be similar in different scenes, the meaning of the action changes significantly with the change in the signs of the pursuer and the victim. Thanks to this approach, it is possible to observe how pursuit scenes of female figures by male characters on red figure pottery underwent important iconographic revisions, especially during the last quarter of the 5th century BC. The traditional subject of abduction was in fact revisited in a more explicitly ritual and non-violent standpoint, and today I will try to explain this particular phenomenon with the contribution of an archaeological context analysis. A paradigmatic case is that of a scene on a calyx crater made by the early Sicilian workshop of the Himera Painter, where the information of the archaeological context of the vase can give us insight to understand this particular iconography. As you know, Himera was a Greek colony in the northwest coast of Sicily, and thanks to the University of Palermo excavations, numerous fragments of red figure pottery were found in the domestic area of the plateau. What I would like to do is to integrate the analysis of images and the analysis of the context of consumptions of such vases in order to better understand the meaning of the crater with the pursuit scene. Let's look at the subject in details. The main side of the crater shows 3 figures walking towards the right. In sequence, starting from the left, there is a female figure wearing a long sleeveless kitten playing a double aulos, a naked male character with a kleina placed behind his back and a blindfold tied around his head, and another female figure striding toward the right but caught in the moment when she turns to look at the man behind her. The central character holds in his right hand an object that could be identified as a stick, while the left arm is flexed at the shoulder and in the direction of his face in a gesture that seems to hint at a dance movement. So the gestures of the figures indicate a certain emphasis of their movements, probably due to the rhythm posed by the auletic music. Moreover, immediately to the left of the girl's face there is also a mirror, held by the female character. The rhythm of the scene seems to suggest a representation of a dance, or at least some particularly lively activity. The music, the setting of the figures, and the ritual sash wrapping on the head of the central character, a sort of mitra, bring to mind the typical atmosphere of Dionysiac Theazoi. But the first element which seems to squeak with an exclusively Dionysian interpretation of the scene depicted in the Himerian krater is the absence of a satyr, a particular that shouldn't go unnoticed considering how the satyr is a presence almost indispensable for the development of the scene both in Attic and the early South Italian production. But let's now focus on the general construction of the scene and on the figurative pattern of the two characters on the right side. If we take a better look at the gesture and the rhythm of these figures, the impression is that we are witnessing not so much a simple procession, but a sort of pursuit where the escaping character, represented in the moment she is about to be reached, turns back her face because she is going to be grabbed by the youth in the middle of the stage. On South Italian pottery, we can usually find the figure of young armored hero, a generic young armored hero, often depicted with shield or spear, but also with a sword or a stick that we also find on the Himerian krater. As a typical characteristic of the young man, we can find a kleina that we also find here on the Himerian krater, and the woman, when she carries something in her hand, often holds a mirror, as on the Himerian krater. Let's other examples of this particular iconographic construction. As already mentioned, the erotic pursuit scenes had a strong and long tradition since the 6th century BC. Andrew Stewart believes that during the 5th century, this iconographic theme suffered a process resulting in a significant iconographic generalization. From the mid-5th century, instead of gods and heroes, generic figures of youths pursuing women appear, in fact, more and more often. But why this change? Why this generalization, and what kind of significance do pursuit scenes assume, at least from the last quarter of the 5th century BC? In order to try to answer these questions, we can mention some scenes spread already in Attic production, but also within the early South Italian vases, where the figure of Eros appears to replace the male figure in the role of a pursuer. The characters pursued, in most cases, turn back their gaze aware of their imminent capture. Therefore, it is evident that there are scenes with an identical pattern to that of the mythical pursuit scene, but in these cases, they are characterized by a clear erotic meaning. Above all, in these cases, the violent aspect is permanently deleted for the representation, and it's precisely this type of pattern that is repeated on the Himerian krater. A scheme that is certainly debtor from the point of view of the figurative construction to the mythical pursuit of Attic pottery, but also a scheme that, after a long process of iconographic and semantic reworking, no longer appears to expressly incorporate the violent connotation, pointing to an exclusively ritual code. The absence of a satyr, the presence of two women, one of them on the lamp, the mirror held on the hand of the pursued girl, which alludes to the erotic word, and finally, the general pattern of the representation then allow us to place this iconography in a renewed figurative tradition, probably connected with some real ritual activities. In support of this interpretation, we can also look at the observation of John Breton Connolly about the cup of Onesimus and the fragment from the Acropolis of Athens, in which the robe of Athena is decorated with pictures of naked running girls that seems to recall female initiation rites. Moreover, we can also mention the figures of running girls depicted on krateriskoi found in the sanctuary of Artemis at Brauron in Attica. This evidence shows us like running and ritual activities are strictly connected to each other. A proof of a ritual very similar to the scene depicted on the Himerian krater and connected to the wedding ceremonies comes also from Sparta. In fact, from the sources available, we know that in Spartan polis there were traditional simulated pursuits during wedding celebrations. In light of these elements, we can try to consider another interpretation for the scene on the Himerian krater as an action related to some real ritual activity connected to wedding, where the main purpose was to stage an abduction which involved a mocked resistance to the capture of the bride. The pursuit, like a ritual dance, is therefore these cases associated with initiation rites and passages of status. In these rituals related to passages of status, Dionysus certainly played an important role. In the Himerian archaeological context, the Dionysiac word is definitely evoked by the music, but also by the type of ritual blindfold worn by the pursuer, and above all from the scene of another calyx crater associated to the hours, where there are female characters holding in their hands a thyrsus. It is not uncommon to find an association between Dionysian's word and erotic allusions in scenes where there has been a pursuit. For example, on this bell crater, attributed to another early Sicilian painter, a young girl trying to escape from Eros is depicted, and it is caught in the moment when he extends his arms forward and tries to grab the woman on the run. This woman, very similar to a Maenad, because of the thyrsus she holding in her hands, is a clear reference to the role of Dionysus in erotic pursuits. Also in this case, it is very interesting to analyze the scheme adopted. The man is portrayed while she runs back and turns her gaze towards Eros, trying to defend herself, putting the thyrsus between her and her pursuer. As already mentioned, to support this new iconographic interpretation, we can use a review of an unusual archaeological context. This is not a burial context like the 19% of the red figure vases findings, but it concerns an everyday situation, probably a neighbored sanctuary. The analysis of the other red figure vases from this domestic area, all of them attributed to the workshop of the Himera Painter, makes it possible to suggest some proposal concerning the semantic and symbolic value attributable to scenes depicted on these artifacts, and to support a new iconographic perspective of the crater with the hypothetical simulated pursuit scene. First of all, we can appreciate the particular iconographic coherence with the other red figure vases found in the same context. This area seems to be characterized by a unique concentration of products made by the single workshop, which probably created a specific pottery set to be used in these rooms. Moreover, in association with 11 red figure vases found within these rooms, it is now essential to report the discovery of numerous terracotta fragments. In almost all cases, they are chests and faces of female figures. From this set of elements, it seems evident that there is a sort of monopoly held by female iconography. Oscilla accumulations of loom weights, arrowheads, maybe voting offers, numerous fragments of arrowle, and last but not least, the anomalous concentration, such in a small space, of so many good quality products, such as red figure vases, suggests the presence of some kind of ritual activity. Another item seems to appear consistently within this area is water. In order to better define the role played by water within these rooms, we can start from the iconographic analysis of an arula. It is the one found in room 18 where the figure of Scylla appears. That of Himera is one of the most ancient iconographic findings of the Homeric monster with a renewed anthropomorphic appearance. The change would be due to a tradition handed down from Stesichorus of Himera, according to which the water monster was defeated by Heracles and reconstructed by her father Phorkys, with a more human appearance. Thanks to this new iconography, the figurative message of Scylla was not therefore linked to destruction, but to a beautiful female creature. In other words, she represents a wish to an happy and successful metamorphosis. And I think there is a strict connection between the monster with more human appearance and the nuptial rituals we can observe on this Boeotian bell crater, with on the one side the figure of Scylla and on the other side a scene of Lutron and Phaethon. Connected with the water and its use, there are also some fragments of luteria and basins found in numerous rooms, And we can't forget that the continuous symbolic allusion to water combined with different classes of materials finds a counterpart in the functional evidence through the presence of the cistern in block 3. This underground structure seems to have been deliberately filled with votive material in the final stages of its use. And there are several fragments of arole found in the cistern that join with other fragments found in the house. So all of these evidence are important clues, in my opinion, of the development of ritual activities closely related with female individuals. Thus, it is possible that these rooms were used for practices related to a particular status assumed by female individuals in certain moments of their lives. And this must have had some relation with the importance of symbolism of water. I'm talking about the particular condition of nymph. And we can find a strong emphasis on water as a main element of some forms of ritual activities in this scene of Lutron-Nymphicon, represented on another calyx crater found in the same area, where there are two naked girls in the presence of a satyr caught in the act of purifying themselves near Euterion. This is certainly one of the most emblematic scenes in this context. The presence inside the house of a crater on which we have a representation characterized by a strong semantic value so markedly focused on the sacred aspect of female world is in fact an essential element for the global definition of the context. And to the nuptial word, we can also associate Elebes Gamikos from room 10, on which the main characters in the scene are two female figures. The left one wears a long sleeveless kitten, a veil on her head, and offers, or maybe she just receives a calatos full of fruits. The woman on the right is in the typical gesture of anacalypsis, which refers explicitly to wedding, like the veil worn by the other female figure. The erotic nuptial theme then comes back on two skiphoi also coming from this area, on which two figures of heroes are holding a mirror in one case and a blindfold in the other. Ending up, it's perhaps possible to identify a strict connection, identify strict iconographic code that regulates all of these images through the use of a common denominator that can explain the presence and function of this object within these rooms. This connecting element might be the wedding rituals. An example of a ritual connected with the nuptial word is on the crater with the pursuit scene that I had the pleasure of discussing with you today, through a new and original reworking of the traditional Attic iconography. The analysis of these images, together with the revision of the archaeological context, provides, in my opinion, an important contribution and interesting insight of this particular iconography, that of the erotic and violent pursuit. This theme was born in the 6th century BC in Attica, and at the end of the 5th century, especially in the West, but also in Attica, it seems to have undergone a significant semantic change, where it is clear that violence participated all in a simulated and ritual way, and where more spaces was given to an explicit ritual code with the evocation of some real ritual activities, like the Lutron-Nymphicon, for example, related to the wedding and to the important social role of the woman, especially in this kind of multi-ethnic community, like in the South Italian and in the Sicily. Thank you very much.